Talking about sport in digital media is hugely important. It's been a massive part of our growth as a company. But before we actually talk about that, it's just this really weird point we're at where we still seem to refer to digital as something different to broadcast. It's probably quite relevant to talk about how, in the words of Thomas Goodwin, who said that digital is like electricity, a totally vital and transformative, entirely background concept. And at some point, we've really got to get beyond this conversation around whether digital is separate from broadcast. It's very much part of everything, and it's just the method of distribution, particularly around sport. And because one of the reasons for that is that screen time is exploding. The amount of time that people are spending in front of screens is exploding. We're all having huge amounts of tri-screening, quad screening, and sport is a classic example of where that is happening. And we're getting increasing access to cheaper and faster mobile internet. We have 3 of the fastest 4G networks anywhere in the world, making it cheaper and faster for Australians to access that content. And of course they are, with over 50% of all mobile cellular data on the Telstra network now related to video. And we are giving ourselves a possibility to connect and consume with huge amounts of digital video. And this is creating something that we talk internally as around the battle for screen time. And of course it's a hugely disruptive space we find ourselves in. But at Seven West Media, we like to believe that disruption can be an enabler of our business. And in sports media, there's no clearer example, which means as a company, we don't have a digital strategy. We have a company strategy in an increasingly digital world. And that strategy is to deliver engagement and value through powerful storytelling. The way we do that is that we need to do 3 things well. We need to own the stories. We need to originate our own stories across all screens and own the IP, the intellectual property of all of those stories. Where we can't own the stories, we have to have the rights to tell the stories on every screen. And that's what brings us back to sports media. Having the rights to tell the story on every screen is absolutely critical for us to create engagement and value out of those powerful stories. And then we have to have the screen business models and products to generate a return on investment from those stories or from those rights. And what does that actually mean in terms of the size of the market? Well, this is Nielsen data using Nielsen DRM data, which, as you know, is a unique audience measure. On this particular slide here, you've got 4 bars to the left. 9 million Australians last month had some form of long-form television content consumed online. 9.3 million Australians. And 9.3 million Australians. And of those 9.3 million Australians, 5.6 million of them viewed some free content. That's all of the catch-up apps like iView, SBS On Demand, Plus 7, 9 Now, 10 Play, etc. 3.8 million used an SVOD platform, and 3.6 million Australians enjoyed some form of sport online, averaged out over 6 months as well. It's probably the most compelling data point out of this for me is the fact that over 9 million Australians have now watched some form of long-form television on demand. And so really long-form television has become an OTT experience for 40% of the country in the last few years, and this is fueling incredible consumer growth. Olympics last year was a game changer for us. Just under 19 million Australians watched the Olympics in some shape or form. Of that 19 million, 3 million of them watched it online and on an owned and operated product, and just over 4 million enjoyed some of the content on social media. It was a huge, massive investment in product and platform, which, as far as we were concerned, really much changed the game for the way that people consume sport online. Fast forward to this year's tennis. 12.8 million people watched the tennis on broadcast. But also, interestingly, out of the final, that we had a fantastic fairy tale ending, of course. 4.4 million people watching that amazing tennis match on that Sunday night. Powerful stories raise all of the boats. So not only did we have the highest television audience for 10 years for that tennis match, 4.4 million, But what we also had was by far the highest streaming audience online at the same time, because it was a powerful story. It wasn't about people choosing to watch it on television or on the mobile, or on their iPad, or on their desktop. They were just drawn to that amazing, powerful story. Melbourne Cup, a great example, really important part of the Melbourne Cup Carnival for us. Huge examples of audiences right across all of the platforms, whether it's social streaming, whether it's broadcast audience, whether it's streaming. And then finally, the Super Bowl. Well, the Super Bowl was the most interesting recent test case, because what we found out with the Super Bowl, because of the timing of it being a midday to 3 p.m. Australian event, by far the highest proportion of all minutes consumed were consumed online out of any event. So almost as much as 5% of all viewing of that event was actually done online. Two final points around sport is that when you stream live sport, you bring in incremental audience. It's not a zero-sum game. People don't choose to go, well, I'm now not going to watch it on broadcast television. I'm going to stream it and turn my television off. That is not what happens. What happens is you attract to your owned and operated products harder to reach, lighter TV users. In the case of sport, you attract affluent young males to your business. So it's another reason why sports and streaming of sport is so important to advertisers. And also the spike that you get. This is Melbourne Cup Day 2016. The blue bar represents all internet traffic on the Telstra network by hour on that day. The first thing you read out of this is that in terms of bandwidth, the bandwidth consumption in the evening on the internet is way greater than the bandwidth consumption in the day. Why? Because things like SVOD and Netflix and streaming video obviously consumes higher amounts of bandwidth in the evening. On Melbourne Cup Day, that red spike though is the streaming of the Melbourne Cup, with the blue line representing the 1 million+ websites and apps available to Australian consumers in the moment. So sport has an unbelievable opportunity to move the needle, change the game, and really influence consumers.